Hi there, everyone. I am Courtney Stinson, and this is about the 7th time I'm trying to get this introduction down. And if I could do outtakes, I'm sure you would laugh. Nonetheless, we're going to save those, we're not going to do them, and we're going to get into the presentation. I will be covering the Sewol ferry disaster in South Korea that recently happened on April 16th. Several hundred people were aboard. The ferry made a sharp right turn and the boat began to list and actually rather quickly capsized. There's some questions whether the captain acted ethically related to his communications and further his actions. We'll go ahead and talk about those and the possible ethic theories that we could apply. From henceforth out, I will refer to the captain as the actor. This is the last time you'll see me until the end of the presentation, and we'll go over the prompts at that time. So, thanks for listening.
Okay, here we go. Let's get started. Communication, ethics, and the Sewol ferry disaster. Title slide. You all know who I am. What I'm going to share with you first is some pictures that I was able to gather throughout the internet. These are, I'm sure you've seen them if you've looked at the if you've read the newspaper, if you've listened to the radio, if you've been searching on the internet, there are so many, there's so much coverage on this right now. It's hard not to know something about what's going on. I'd like to just remind everybody it's an emerging event, and there are still a lot of things that the public does not know and might not know for a while. I'll do the summary really quick. On April 16th, the Sewol capsized in the Yellow Sea. Approximately 476 people were aboard the ship, most of them high school students. The specific ship that we're talking about had been retrofitted, and there was concern voiced at least by one person, I believe it was the captain of the ship, that the retrofits made the ship unbalanced. And due to what is considered a very sharp turn by not even the captain, but one of his junior captains, if you will, that was piloting at that time, or that was steering at that time, the boat began to list, and the passengers at that time were told to stay put. Distress calls were sent, and despite being fairly close to land, substantial help was slow to arrive. As I said, the captain of the ship had voiced some concerns about the ship's stability. He was not the captain of, he was not captaining the boat when this accident occurred. There was a secondary captain that was in charge. So according to a Washington Post article, a lot of maritime and disaster experts just say there's a whole bunch of things that went wrong all at once. The very little safety training, the passengers being told to stay put when the boat began to list, the captain and the crew being among the first to flee, the distress call, and then the help being slow to arrive, and South Korean agencies having no clear control center and no way to delegate responsibilities. This is just a quick timeline. You can see what the ship looked like when it began to list, what time it was when the evacuation was ordered, what the boat looked like at that time, and how quickly the ferry sunk. And from basically 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock, the ferry is completely underwater. So ethical dilemma, I think there could have been 3. I ultimately selected one. The first ethical dilemma that I thought about was it ethical that the captain chose to save himself before saving his passengers? Number 2, was it ethical for the captain to delay evacuation and communicating to passengers to stay put? And number 3, does the Korean culture of respecting superiors and elders lead to lack of insight? My selection for my ultimate, what I was going to talk about for this paper, was combining the first 2 and not pursuing the third option. So was it ethical that the actor chose to delay evacuation and communicate to passengers to stay put while ultimately saving himself before saving the vast majority of his passengers? Possible ethical approaches: ethical egoism, the doctrine that each person ought to pursue his or own self-interest exclusively. In other words, if it's right for me, then that's all that matters. How do the actor's actions reflect this theory? By not helping his passengers first, he thought only of himself, the actor did, thus his self-interest was preserved. Also, additionally, by communicating to his passengers to stay put, the actor was not transparent. The lack of communication in this case resulted in the passengers not being able to be rescued. The second ethical approach possibly would be utilitarianism, that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. There's a lot of unhappy people right now in South Korea, and I think there's people throughout the world that think the actions of the captain and his crew weren't they didn't make the best decision. So since utilitarianism is built upon actions being right in proportion to promoting happiness, I would say the actor's actions violate utilitarianism. Perhaps if he would have communicated more effectively with everybody, and if he would have helped his passenger's safety to prior to helping himself, this definitely would have promoted more happiness. He might have died in the process. Still, if you weigh it out and he was able to save 50 people, I would still say that promoted more happiness, and also would have led, it would have put him as a hero in his culture's eyes, and that's something that's very valued. And the third possible option would be deontology, which is the study of what you're supposed to do. It's the Greek word for duty. And so what is it that you're supposed to do? We have the categorical imperative, and that's part of deontology. And the categorical imperative was given to us by Immanuel Kant. And there's a picture of him on the right-hand side of the screen from the 3-minute philosophy video that we watched in class earlier. I thought it was a great video. The content on this page is from that because it was easy for me to understand, and I liked the way the author worded it. So the categorical imperative is an absolutely non-negotiable moral law that holds up regardless of circumstances. It has 3 parts. One, that your actions have universality, meaning it's okay for you to do it if you think it's okay for everybody else to do it. Every human being is an end, not a means to an end, so you should not manipulate people nor lie to them ever. End stop, basically, and you need to act as though you are the moral authority of the entire universe. How the actor's actions violate this theory. As far as I could tell, he violated at least 2 categories of the categorical imperative by not communicating effectively and abandoning ship first. The actor is saying it would be okay for someone else to do that to him. In the same way, I think that he manipulated people, though he didn't lie, by using his authority to tell them what to do. He was able to focus more on saving his own skin than that of others. The actual choice made by the actor, of the options that I've shared in this presentation, I think his actions most resembled ethical egoism. By saving himself, he said that was the most important action. I have here that he saved himself first. There's a little bit, there's some question on, was he the first or was he among the first? Either way, the overall theory is that he did nothing to help save his passengers. And additional ramifications from this actually are pretty extensive. He brought shame to the ferry's actual captain, and the captain feels bad that he wasn't there, and he thinks that the actions of a colleague that did this are awful. The suicide of the vice principal at the student's school, that vice principal actually was saved. He was rescued as the ferry was, when the ferry capsized, but he felt guilty, and guilty for the trip and also for being saved when so many of his students died, and he committed suicide. And also South Korea's prime minister recently turned in their resignation. Do I agree with the actor's choice? I most certainly do not. I think there are at least 2 other options the actor could have selected that would have produced better results, altruism being one of them, and utilitarianism being the second. I spoke a little bit about utilitarianism. That would have, of course, promoted the most happiness for the most amount of people in what still is a tragic situation. And altruism would be the captain not thinking of his self at all, but thinking what he could do for others during that time. I don't believe he did that. And if someone was really interested, I think that they could do a paper on this on intercultural issues. I chose not to, but I think that definitely has some play. As a final note, I think that this was indeed a tragedy and one that could have been avoided. It does, there are some things though that might come positive, that might be a positive thing from this tragedy. Improved focus on ferry safety, number one, more thorough safety inspections. Whistleblowing might not be ignored as much as it is right now in the culture, and attention to overall emergency preparedness programs and training. All those are positive outcomes.